Welcome to the Pat White Show.
Well, everybody probably remembers that big hubbub we had about getting a casino over there in New Haven, Indiana. The folks down there in southern Indiana wanted to move their casino from the Rising Sun area to the east side of New Haven and spend $500 million building a new development. Well, turns out none of the politicians in the area wanted anything to do with it, and as a result, when the measure to discuss it down in Indianapolis came out the floor, the chairman of the committee said, no, we're not even going to give it a hearing. Well, suddenly the whole thing looked like it was dead, right? Nah, don't think so, folks. I do not think so, because let me tell you what's now going on. Turns out that Circle Center Mall down in downtown Indianapolis, right there at the corner of Illinois and Meridian and Maryland and Georgia, it's a downtown mall. Had a grand idea in the beginning. It was very nice. Tons of stores in there. Huge parking facility. Had a crossover walkway to the Omni Severin Hotel, so people staying in the hotel could go over to this mall. Had everything. Boy, really nice, fancy, schmancy. Except, well, people didn't come to it. And then kids came in and took it over. Turned out to be a giant disaster. So now the mall is closing down. But guess what? A new company has come in, Hendricks Commercial Properties. They have come in and said, hey, you know what? We're going to take the property over. But it's going to take us about 6 years to make everything work. And we're going to reopen it in 2030. But we got some interesting ideas we want to put to the test. See how they float in downtown Indy. CEO of Hendricks said, quote, our goal is to create the true heart of the city, a place that brings energy to downtown every day and not just during major events. So you know what I think they're planning on? Casino. Opening up in the Circle Center Mall. Ultimately, yes. You could put shops in there. You could put a casino in there. You got the parking. You got the hotel space. Everything is designed to put a downtown Indianapolis casino right there next to Lucas Oil Field, the field house. Everything it needs is going to be right there. So you know what? Looks to me like that may be the ultimate plan. Now, everything's got to be approved through the state, but I'm guessing this thing is going to go that through like grass through a goose. And it will be done. Everything will be taken care of, and ultimately the entire project will be okayed, and suddenly a downtown casino straight in the heart of Indy, so everybody coming in can have a great time, bring a lot of people there, and a lot of money to the city of Indianapolis and the county of Marion, which they desperately need. Little something maybe you haven't thought about, but keep your eye out, folks. I believe that Rising Sun Casino will ultimately end up in Circle Center Mall in downtown Indianapolis. My thoughts, I'm just guessing, but I think I'm going to be right this time. Let's just wait and see. If you're a fan of Indiana University basketball, and there's many of you out there, well, you're probably a little bit concerned about what's going on with your favorite basketball team. I'll tell you what's going on with your favorite basketball team. It's one, a new coach, which is not necessarily a problem, but two, the transfer portal. That, my friends, is the big problem. And maybe NIL goes along with that. Let me explain to you what's happened. Currently, Indiana University, under the new coach, Darian DeVries, has lost virtually every player on their roster. I think there's only one left. I think his name is Dallas James. He's on a scholarship from South Carolina State, never played a minute. But everybody on the team, since Darian DeVries was announced to be coach, has left. Now, that's perfectly right. That's what they can do. The rules say it. If you want to go into transfer portal, you can go to any team you want to, any year you want to, apparently. That's the latest information that's happening in the world of basketball and football. So, what's the coach going to do? He's going to have to recruit an entirely new team of basketball players. I don't know if he's going to be able to get the ones he wants, whether they're 4-star, 5-star, whatever. New coach coming in from West Virginia. Well, he's got his work cut out for him. What's the team going to be like with nothing more than freshmen and maybe some transfer portals coming in? I do not know. But for those of you that are fans of Indiana basketball, it's not going to be the same basketball you're used to. This is not the days of Bob Knight. Sorry, folks, it doesn't work that way. You see, NIL, the transfer portal, has changed everything because now schools can offer athletes at another school a certain amount of money to come and play for their school. One of the IU players was offered over $4 million. You heard me right. College student offered over $4 million to play for a different college. Guess what? He entered the transfer portal. And that's what's happening. Now the courts have declared that if a player wants to leave a team, he or she can. And if a player wants to get money for their name, image, and likeness, he or she can. So now colleges are having to pay their players if they want the big players. This is going on in football. It's going on in basketball as well. The problem now is for IU. Their new coach, Darren DeVries, seems like a nice gentleman, but he's got his work cut out for him. Where is he going to find himself 12 or 13 new kids to come in, play together as a group, and win? I frankly have no idea. It's going to be an interesting season when it crops up this coming next fall. But remember, IU football is becoming a big prominence nowadays. IU was very good last year and has the potential to become, well, even better this year. So will the interest in sports at IU campus go from basketball to football? Well, one really doesn't know yet. But it's out there on the horizon, folks. Brand new IU basketball coach with no players and a football coach who won 10 straight games and maybe could be even better this year with a whole new crop of players coming in. Very interesting storyline. Let's see where it all plays out. Indiana University sports, and, well, who's going to be the winner? Nobody yet knows. All we can do is hope and pray. If you're a fan of the Second Amendment, well, I am, frankly, and so are a lot of other people, a new law in Colorado may catch your attention. Not that it affects people in our state, in Indiana, only in Colorado, but it could happen in our state. Believe me, anything can happen at any time. And why? Because this law in Colorado has to do with the sales of guns and ammunition. It seems that the residents of Colorado voted on a proposition. This wasn't in the House or the Senate. This was a vote of the populace in Colorado. It's called Proposition KK. And what it said was, hey, the state of Colorado can put a tax on people buying guns or gun parts, like magazines and the action and the barrel and what have you, let's say you get something new, and ammunition. That's right. The tax is 6.5%. Now, that's going to be paid for when you go buy your gun at a gun store, you go buy ammunition or whatever, 6.5% put on by the state of Colorado because the residents of Colorado voted for it. Now, that law is being challenged legally by a whole bunch of gun organizations from the NRA, all the way to the Gun Owners Association of America. Probably 4, 5, 6 organizations are suing in court over this particular law, saying it's not legal, it's not constitutional. Now, why are they having so many people sue? Because you're going to have to, when you go into court, you have to establish standing. So if you're going to sue, you've got to say to the court, we have standing because we are going to be hurt if this happens. You're putting a tax on guns and tax on ammunition. You're going to affect people who will not be able to afford it. And by having so many different gun organizations and the NRA suing, they're saying, fine, represents everybody. Maybe even as a class action type suit. All right, that's an important thing. But remember, putting a 6.5% tax on guns, there's an old adage that goes back a long, long, long time ago that says you can tax and you can tax to death. Now think about that. Colorado says, okay, well, we don't like 6.5%. We want to make guns really illegal, so Let's put a tax on there of 60%, 100% tax. And eventually you start affecting people in one particular area, one particular group of people. You're going to say, no, we're going to take that away from you and we're going to cause you harm because you can't afford it. Well, you can't do that. That's not legal in the Constitution. You can't harm one particular group because one group says, well, we're going to harm that group and do something to take away their rights. So this lawsuit in Colorado, now I realize you're saying, well, it doesn't affect us here, and it doesn't. But you never know what could happen down the road if other states. Right now, you've got 18 states controlled by Democrats in America. 18 states. They can decide to invoke the same thing and say, hey, we want to get rid of guns because, well, there's an anti-gun movement that exists in this country. And as politicians and politics changes, state could shift from a red state to a blue state. It does happen. Enough people move from a blue state to a red state, they can turn a red state blue. Happens. You've seen it happen before. It could happen again. So all I'm saying is this new law in Colorado needs to be challenged, and it is being challenged. How will it work out? We shall see. Keep your eyes peeled, folks, because this could have a big effect on you and me eventually. Well, in case you haven't noticed it, a couple of big lawsuits have been filed, one here in the state of Indiana and the other a national lawsuit that I believe both could ultimately end up in the United States Supreme Court. Just depends on how it plays out. First one's a national one. Well, Secretary Linda McMahon, she's the head of the Department of Education. This is the one that Trump wants to get rid of. Well, turns out the American Federation of Teachers, the biggest teachers union in the country, has decided to sue Ms. McMahon and her department, saying, you're telling us that we can't utilize DEI. And if we don't do what you tell us to do, you're going to cut our federal allotment, our federal gimme money, our federal allocation. And we don't like that. And because we don't like that, we are going to sue you, saying that you didn't define DEI well enough. Our teachers don't understand what DEI means and how it affects them in teaching. Well, I don't think DEI has anything to do with teaching. It has to do with who you hire, who you place into positions. Every job should be based upon merit, not upon the color of your skin or anything else. But the teachers union has filed a lawsuit against the Department of Education. Now, what's going to happen? Well, if they can't get this settled, ultimately, I believe this will end up in the U.S. Supreme Court. As a matter of fact, I also think getting rid of the Department of Education probably will end up there at the same time. But the second lawsuit is even more interesting. It takes place here in the state of Indiana. It seems that Governor Mike Braun introduced a new executive order when he got into office. It's Executive Order number 25-36. Previously, if you were, a transgender person, you could go in and have your birth certificate changed, apparently to whatever sex you were or thought you were. Well, Governor Braun came in and said, no, we ain't going to allow this. This ends here and now. You are what you are. If you're born a male, you're a male. If you're born a female, you're a female. And that's the way it's going to be. Well, the Indiana ACLU, headed up by a gentleman by the name of Rick Falk, who happens to be the director of the ACLU, has filed a major lawsuit against the governor of Indiana, saying that, hey, you can't do that because we live in what is known as an era of modern gender ideology. I don't know about you, but I'm not quite sure what that means, but apparently it's so you can change your sex to anything you personally desire. Both of those lawsuits, I believe, have the opportunity, maybe, to end up in the United States Supreme Court. Will they? That all depends upon how everybody fights them out. You got to be heard in one court, go up to another court, Court of Appeals. You lose there, you take it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. But remember, the U.S. Supreme Court only takes about 75 cases a year. So, will either of these qualify for the U.S. Supreme Court? It's anybody's guess. But interesting cases, worth following. So, if you're looking for something to do in your spare time, follow a couple of lawsuits. It just might be entertaining. Well, here it is, spring, folks. And what's the number one thing that happens during spring that gets everybody's attention? Baseball season, right? Yes, baseball season's underway, and it's a long season. Starts in March, ends up at November, somewhere in that area. But baseball, America's pastime, right? That's what people want to watch. Your favorite team, whether it's Cincinnati or Cleveland or Detroit or Chicago or, well, whomever you happen to be a favorite, well, their games are existing. Everybody can check the scores every day, see where your team's going. Turns out that WPTA Channel 21 has decided to broadcast a number of games this year for the Fort Wayne Tin Caps, our local team, and the Cincinnati Reds. Now, those games are going to be on their secondary channels, what we call their digital channels. One of them is the Tin Caps, are going to be on the My TV, and that's one of their specialty digital channels. And the Cincinnati Reds are going to be on the CW. Now, only one game is going to be on the national one, and that was an NBC game, opening game for the Cincinnati versus the Giants. But according to WPTA TV, there's going to be 12 Tin Cap games featured on the My TV. So 12 games starting in April and going clear through August. So you get a chance to see some of those. And if you're a Cincinnati Reds fan, well, they're going to have 10 of those. And obviously they already start in the month of March and will go through, looks like September when the Pirates play Cincinnati. Now, if you like baseball, there's a chance to watch it. You've got the digital channels you can switch over to. Now, who's doing all of this? Well, it turns out that Gray Media, who is the ones who owns Channel 21, has teamed up with the folks at FanDuel Sports Network. Now, FanDuel is a gambling site because, believe it or not, gambling has now come into baseball. That's right, it was the biggest no-no back years and years ago. It cost Pete Rose getting into the Hall of Fame or whatever, and you could argue that for days and days if you want. But gambling is now into baseball. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you how big it is. I mean, you're seeing gambling sponsoring all kinds of stuff in baseball. What's something they never would have allowed years ago. But times change, and money's money. And they're looking for it any way they can find it. Now, used to be in the old days that nobody wanted to get near a place like Las Vegas because, well, Las Vegas is gambling, right? Well, now you got pro teams putting the football teams in Vegas and baseball teams building new stadiums in Vegas. Because now, gambling is okay when it comes to sports. Apparently it exists. So if you're a Tin Caps fan, hey, the Tin Caps are going to be on My TV for a total of 12 times. And the Cincinnati Reds are going to be on for 10 times on the CW. So if you're looking for something enjoyment, you love baseball, there's a place to watch it, folks. If you can't make the stadium, if you can't show up to the games, hey, at least you can watch it on TV. And thank the folks over at the FanDuel Sports Network, because FanDuel lets you bet on games, something that was always prohibited until, well, money got involved, and then money wins every time. Well, if you've been following the situation that's been going on involving the president, illegal aliens, Tren de Agua gang, MS-13, and all those other particular individuals, about being captured and taken and sent to El Salvador by U.S. airplanes. You probably heard about that entire story. Well, now it's turned into a gigantic judicial fight. It's gone into Congress. And now that's where they're arguing about this, involving a judge who told the U.S. government, the Trump administration, to turn the planes around and bring everybody back into the United States. One judge, one judicial judge. Well, the question is, does that judge have the authority to do that? You have to understand something. The United States is built upon a three-legged stool situation. You have the legislative branch, which creates laws, puts the money in the situation. The judicial branch, which rules on the constitutionality of what is done via the laws created by the judicial or the legislative branch, and the executive branch, which runs everything outside of the legislative and the judicial branch. So you have three legs to the stool, and they fight with each other on occasion. Well, this looks like to be one of those occasions. It's dealing with judicial overreach and the limits of federal courts. Now, does this one federal judge have the authority to tell the Trump administration and the U.S. government to bring back people that were being exported or taken away, who are invading our country, taking it over? The Trump administration says we're using a law dating many years back, I think it's 1795, somewhere in there, particular law that says, hey, if we're under attack with organizations coming in at war or our nation's being invaded is a very interesting term here, that these people could be, well, deported. So now it's becoming down to a fight. What can be done, and does a judge have that right to do that? Well, you have to understand something. If one judge could tell the entire administration nationwide, you, me, and everybody else in the country, what can be done, who's to say that another federal judge can't say just the opposite? So who really controls what's going on? Well, I believe the truth of the matter is going to end up being this entire case involving this particular judge is ruling about the transportation of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, to El Salvador, is probably going to end up in the Supreme Court, which is where it belongs. Federal judges do not, unless you can find case law or it's in the Constitution, do not have the right to tell the entire nation with a universal decision what to do. Now, you could talk about Marbury Madison case that dates back many, many years and discuss that, but the truth of the matter is the U.S. Supreme Court has the overall decision for the entire United States. One judge cannot pass a universal condemnation or universal decision that affects everybody in America, because another federal judge can do just the opposite. Therefore, the U.S. Supreme Court controls it. Something to think about. It looks like it's going to end up in the Supreme Court, and we shall see what they decide, because right now, too many cooks can spoil the pot real fast and real quick. You know, many times parents with kids are looking for the best school or high school to put their kids in. They want their kids to go to college, or they're looking for the right neighborhood to locate in for the best schools for their kids to go to school. Well, a website called Home Stratosphere has published the 30 best public high schools in the state of Indiana if you're sending your kid to college or you're looking for the right area to live where your kids get the best education. Number 30. All right, there's 30 in there. But did Fort Wayne make any of that? Well, it turns out they did. Number 24 is Homestead High School. Now, back in 2023, this is where the data came from, they had 2,502 students with a student-to-teacher ratio of 19.1. So they were number 24 in the list of 30. Number 23 was Carroll High School. One above it, 2,475 students. Teacher-student ratio of 17-1. All right, so 24 and 23 are Homestead and Carroll. Good neighborhoods to live in. That's why people live in those particular demographics. That's been chosen out pretty much by, well, the population in the city. Here's what you may not have known about. Number 13, East Allen University. Now you're going, what? Who have heard of that? Well, apparently it came out of the old Paulding High School. They only have 317 students. Teacher ratio is 19-1, but they're actually number 13 on the top 30 high schools. Number 4, I wanted to get you the best high schools in the state. It comes up the largest high school in the state with the most population, believe it or not, is Carmel. Carmel High School has a population of 5,327 students. Now that's 17-1 ratio. But if you're living down there in the Indianapolis area, apparently Carmel's where everybody wants to go, and that's why they have 5,327 students. But here in the Fort Wayne area, people are living southwest and northwest. Southwest is Homestead, and northwest is, well, good old everyday Carroll High School. Now, can students change? Can schools change? Yes, they can. But right now, people are voting with their money and their feet. And either they go to Southwest, which originally was the land of a Boyd, as they called it, and that's where Homestead High School was. But Carroll High School has come up, and Carroll High School right now is one of the most dynamic high schools in the entire county. And they're attracting a lot of people who want to live in the Carroll High School area. Matter of fact, you'll see it, realtors are advertising Carroll High School District, because that's where people want their kids to go. So if you're looking for a college prep school or one for home buyers with kids, 2 high schools in Fort Wayne apparently are considered the best, but one, small, exceeds both of them. And it's right here in Fort Wayne. Pick the school you want to go to, pick the neighborhood you want to live in, but now you've got some information you didn't have before, and now you know. Well, if you've been following politics in the last few weeks, you probably heard a story about, will Donald Trump run for a 3rd term? Yeah, that's been battered around a lot by a lot of people. And let me tell you what I know about it, and so you can take a decision for yourself on what you think he could or could not. Because there's people saying, well, there's workarounds, he could get around it. Well, let's go back in history. Last president to serve more than 2 terms was FDR. This was back in the 1940s during World War II. He was into his 4th term when he died. And then an amendment was introduced to the Constitution clear back in 1947, and it finally was ratified back in 1951. That's how long it takes to ratify something in the Constitution. And that was the 22nd Amendment. And it said that no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice. Now, that's the 22nd Amendment. More than twice. That ensures that, well, you don't get people running and turning it into an autocratic situation, and almost like a royalty dynasty, if you will. Now, other people are saying, well, yeah, that's true, but there's a way around it. Well, the way around it is this. Let's say in 2028, that instead of Donald Trump running for president, J.D. Vance runs for president. He gets elected. Donald Trump is his running mate as vice president. J.D. Vance then resigns as president, and Donald Trump once again becomes president. That's the workaround. Well, guess what? That ain't going to work. I'll tell you why. There's a thing called the 12th Amendment. And the 12th Amendment says anybody who is unable to run for president shall not be elected vice president. So what it says in the 12th Amendment is, if you're not allowed to be president, you can't run for vice president, because obviously you could become president again, but you're not eligible. So those 2 things control what could happen involving Donald Trump running for president again. But here's something even bigger to think about. If you start running down that road of having more than 2 terms, isn't it possible the Democrats could say, well, they'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to run Barack Obama for a 3rd time. Don't think it hasn't been thought about, folks, because it has. So I'm just trying to tell you what's good policy. Now, if the policies that exist during the Trump administration are acceptable to the majority of Americans who vote, and they decide to vote to keep the concept going, and the people who represent those policies keep them in office, well, there it is. That's how it works. And it should stay that way for as long as the American public says, yeah, we like what's going on. So I'm just putting this in perspective for you. You know, the worst thing you can say is, can't elect a president twice. But here's the biggest thing that sticks in people's craw. Well, if we can do that to the president, why can't we do it to members of the House and Senate who could be in there and run forever? Well, unfortunately, you're going to have to change the Constitution. And to do that, you're going to have 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and the majority, a large majority of the United States to be able to agree to it. And if you think the House and the Senate are going to vote 2/3 to get rid of their jobs, I don't know what you're smoking, but put it away. It just ain't going to happen. I don't know if you're following all the news reports that have been coming out lately involving the North River property. Now, if you don't know what the North River property is, well, remember the old OmniSource scrapyard that used to be downtown, right there north of the St. Mary's River, bordering on Clinton Street, across the street from the Science Central, if you remember that. Well, obviously, OmniSource got rid of that property, but it sat there unused and untouched for years and years. And then there was a study done on what the ground holds and what was underneath the ground. That study's been kept secret. I don't know if it's ever come out. It may have, but I'm not aware of it. But now, people seem to be fighting over getting that property. And the fight goes to an organization called Fort Wayne Next. Well, Fort Wayne Next came out and says, hey, Snyder High School, you want to build a new stadium, $30 million for the Fort Wayne Community Schools? Hey, build it downtown, and we'll save you $5 million. Save you money, put the stadium downtown of the property we want to build. Well, for whatever reason, the Fort Wayne Community Schools came out and said, no, we ain't doing that. All right, that's their right. They can bill their money, and they want to put the stadium on Snyder High School grounds, which is a concern to me because you're going to have 4,000 people in that stadium. I'm guessing roughly there's going to be a need for parking spaces for about 1,000 cars. I don't know where you're going to park those around Snyder High School. I still haven't figured that one out yet. But needless to say, they're going to build their stadium at Snyder, and that's their call. But that property downtown still becomes an issue. Who's involved with this? The names that have been mentioned are a gentleman by the name of Trout Moser, president of National Oil and Gas, but another name keeps cropping up, Eric Doden. Now, Eric Doden, if you remember, was running for the governor's post in 2024. His name keeps cropping up in this as a partner for Mr. Moser. And they had a group called Cumberland Development. Well, Cumberland Development happens to own a whole bunch of property adjacent to the North River property on High Street in Barthold. So they already own some ground there, and everybody's proposing something they want to do. The latest one from Fort Wayne Next, which really kind of amazed me, was for $1.8 billion they were going to invest. Now, what are you getting for $1.8 billion? Well, they said there's going to be an event center, a natatorium, which is like a big swimming pool place. Apparently, that's where they want that big natatorium or the big swimming pool from the Olympics, which was down in Indianapolis for the trials. Bring that up and put that in that particular property. Then they were going to have a youth sports complex and a pro stadium for both football and soccer. Now, my guess is that has to do with the Fort Wayne Soccer Club and the new stadium they want to build. But apparently they're going to build that on Bass Road. So I'm kind of figuring out who's doing what here. Well, now it turns out the city of Fort Wayne comes out and says, we want nothing to do with any of those groups. We're not connected to them, and we are not selling the property to the folks from Cumberland or Domo Development or anybody else for anywhere between $8 and $10 million, which is what apparently the offer was going to be to the city to buy the property. So the city now wants to build a $26 million project. I'm not quite sure where they're going to get the money from that for taxes or whatever. The problem is, so many people want that property, but nobody wants to tell you what's really going on. And the last thing is, what's under that ground? Has that study ever been released? I know I'm asking questions because I don't know. So what is really going on, and why is there a big fight going on over a property that nobody really knows exactly what's underneath it? So there's the story, folks. If you know something, maybe you know more than the rest of us do. Because right now, everybody's fighting, but nobody has answers, and nobody really knows what's going on. Today I had a very, very special opportunity, and that was to attend the 100th birthday celebration of WOWO Radio. It was held in downtown Fort Wayne at the old Fort Wayne National Bank building, which now I believe is the PNC Bank, 26th floor, which used to be the Summit Club years ago, and now it's a reception hall. It was very nice event. And the nice thing about attending this event was, well, you got to see a lot of people from your past. And you think about it. I worked for WOWO from 1992 until 2010. And during that period of time, I met a whole lot of people, worked with a whole lot of different people, and some of them, well, I still got to see because they're still around. Many of those people were introduced, and it was really a pleasure to see them and chat with some of them. It was really great. But they put on a very, very nice program. Kayla and the other folks put on a very nice show talking about all the things that WOWO had done over the years. And something very special, individuals from the city, the state, and even the U.S. Capitol did presentations to WOWO honoring their 100th year. And you think about it, a radio station being 100 years old is pretty doggone special. And not everyone could say that. And obviously WOWO is one that could. And WOWO was, well, the life of Indiana. It was the 50,000 watt blowtorch. And WO, well, WO, the name came about in an interesting manner, which I wasn't aware of. Everything east of the Mississippi radio station begins with a W. With the west, it begins with a K. But the letters in the afterword, well, they had a contest, and they came up with, just finding the easiest way to say a word in WOWO, WOWO, was the easiest thing they could come up with. And there was a contest, and somebody said, Wayne offers wonderful opportunity. And apparently that's what it meant back in the old days. But many people were there to congratulate WOWO, and just sitting there and talking to some of those folks was very special. One of the greatest people I dealt with was program director when I was there, and he left and then ended up coming back and is now the program director again, John Zimney. Z, as we called him. He's still there. We had a wonderful chat, and he reminded me of an incident that happened when I was back working on WOWO many years ago. I read an article from USA Today newspaper, and it had to do with the cleanliness of restrooms in various fast food restaurants. And one of the places they mentioned they were not real happy with, apparently, was the McDonald's. Now, it's just an article I saw. It wasn't a big deal. I just read the article. Well, apparently, the people at McDonald's, at least the local people, were not pleased. And they basically went through and canceled all their McDonald's advertising on not just WOWO, and we didn't carry any McDonald's advertising, so we dealt with the wrong demographic. But the other stations in our chain did, and they canceled the whole thing. Well, that was one of the things I lived through. But I could tell you, talking to the likes of folks like Art Salzberg and John Zimney and all the folks who were there and all the national awards, folks, it was an honor. For me, it was an honor to be able to serve on a radio station that, when you look at it, so few people currently are around to be able to say that. And when they asked all the past and present people of WOWO to stand up, it wasn't a big crowd, folks. So I'm proud to say that I was one of those folks. Way back a long time ago, but I was there, I saw it, I lived it, and I experienced it. And today, I'm still thankful that I had a chance to be part of a legendary radio station in Fort Wayne, Indiana, WOWO. And I'm glad I did.
Happy trails to you.